befuddled and flabbergasted feelings at all about adding Kong accessories to Shimo and Scar King, you know? Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Sippy the Nomad here. Thank you for stopping by, and today we are seeking to answer the question between the SH Monsterarts Shimo and the Hiya Toys Exquisite Basic Shimo. Which is better? But that's pretty much all I have to say. Also, okay, but all joking aside, a little bit of housekeeping here before we get started. 1, I'm going to remain as objective as possible. 2, we are only seeing promotional pictures. 3, we don't know what QC issues we're going to get between the two of them. We can use our past knowledge to kind of surmise which is going to have more or less QC issues, but we can't say for sure. And 4, we cannot completely make a definitive answer until we have the figures in hand. However, given what we know from SHMA and from Hiya Toys, we can again kind of gauge what the experience is going to be like and at least tip the scales in one direction or the other. So first, why don't we just knock the big old mama jamma out of the way and talk about the price? Okay, the Hiya Toys figure. It's a little bit smaller. We've seen images, not of them together, but like paper cutouts based on their dimensions recently. I'll put a picture up here of what I've been seeing online. And the Hiya Toys is a little bit smaller, ranging from $60 to $85. And the SH Monsterarts version, while it says 27,500 yen, which roughly translates to $174, I actually learned that my estimate was a little bit conservative. And we're actually looking about $220 to $260 for Shimo from SH Monsterarts. I have thoughts on that. So I actually learned a little bit about that from a stream that Figure Mania show Harold put on with some friends, including Shinrabjira, Rockchella, and the Articulation series, in which the Articulation series mentioned, you know, there's certain subsidies with China to some companies like Hiya that probably allows them to make their figures for a little bit cheaper, whereas SH Monsterarts doesn't really have that. They're not just sitting there twirling their mustaches and smoking their cigars, and they're like, oh, $500, you know, $600 for this one. No, it costs this much for a reason. That doesn't necessarily make it any less unsavory. It still sucks that this is a possibly $260 figure when we feel like we're maybe getting quality that's not really up to snuff there. So I definitely understand the outrage. I'm just saying that go check out the VOD if they put that up there from Figure Mania show. They do a pretty good job of explaining it. Doesn't justify it as far as like our wallets, but it is interesting insight nonetheless. So there you have it. The price difference is enormous between these two figures. SHMA one is a little bit bigger. We are looking at a bigger figure. It's probably going to scale a little bit better with Godzilla, and I imagine because the Hiya one is smaller, but the Hiya Godzilla is bigger, that the scaling is going to be a little bit off, but that's just kind of up to you to determine if you even think that that matters, because apparently in the movie it doesn't really matter all that much as well. Let's talk about sculpt. I think this is perhaps the most important factor. When you look at the sculpt in general, as far as like the silhouette, let's take a peek at some images that kind of compare. Yeah, the sculpt of the SH Monsterarts one doesn't look horrendous. I see some people saying it's like absolutely awful, it looks horrendous. No, there's still detail there and everything, but it definitely appears less detailed. I think the scaling on Hiya Toys kind of like midsection here is a lot better. I think the scaling, especially on the head, is a lot more defined. That doesn't mean that this looks bad, it's just a little softer. But as far as proportions go, I don't think Shimo looked this kind of gaunt is I think the wrong word, but like slender and serpentine, where she looked a little more bulky, I think. So also the Thagomizer, that's another part of the sculpt. You can kind of see it here a little bit, but the Thagomizer, this looks more film accurate. This looks more, I guess this is based off the concept art, probably the same thing that happened with Ghidorah. But yeah, we're looking at a less accurate sculpt. And you know, from the Thagomizer to the midsection, her arms kind of look a little puffy here. I don't really quite know what's going on with that, but that looks a little bit off to me. But the big thing, the head sculpt. The head sculpt on the SH Monsterarts here is longer than it appears in the movie. It doesn't have that membrane connecting her jaws, and she just kind of looks a little, hey! We're here, kind of still a little bit like that, but on the Hiya version, you know, she's got the membrane. The head sculpt looks a little bit more accurate to what we see in the film. And I just think it overall looks more true to the film. I love this picture. It's just kind of funny because she literally does that towards the end of the movie. She makes that kind of like face. Oh, I love that. But yeah, the Hiya definitely has the edge as far as the sculpt goes at least in the face department, but I think also in the body department and the arms and everything. Like everything just seems more proportionate on the Hiya version. Okay, moving right along here. Let's talk about paint application. They mentioned on the Hiya version that she has reflective materials that are going to reflect the light. And I think they're trying to do that with their weird 1960s claymation movie hue going on here. And you can see some purples and greens and pinks and everything where she's supposed to just be white. There is a picture where it shows her probably a more accurate version of what her color looks like. But there is a big downside actually to the Hiya version in this area. I think that the SH Monsterarts version has a little bit of the edge as far as maybe not so much paint, but material, whereas it's translucent. Her Thagomizer spikes and her shoulder crystals and head crystals and everything all appear to be translucent. Now, there is a trade-off because I think the rest of the figure looks a little bit kind of tacky or something. Like just something seems unfinished about it and unrendered about it. But I do wish the Hiya Toys had that translucent crystal effect. Now, yeah, here you can see her color is a little bit better. This is probably more what she's going to be looking like, and you can still tell there's even a little bit of pink kind of going on from whatever lighting setup they had, but I think she'll be a little bit more white and accurate. But there's another picture of her here that shows why I think she's a little more rendered and possibly gonna like look better on a shelf with the other figures. Is you can kind of see between her scales here, you see some weathering and you see some dirt and some buildup and stuff like that. And I think that that's important because here it just looks like this has either been just completely slathered with one shade of white paint with a little bit of blue kind of down her underbelly and everything, or it's just white plastic or something. And just something is unrendered about this and looks a little bit more finished and attention to detail about this one. Is there anything else to say about paint? Oh, okay. So here's another thing. Her teeth are whitish here, it seems, but it's kind of hard to kind of blend, where here you can see they're a little bit more yellow. I also like on the SH Monsterarts figure, so just kind of being completely objective and fair, I don't like how on the Hiya one, her mouth membrane and her tongue and everything is kind of a brighter pink, whereas here is a little red. I like that starker contrast between just that sheer white and then kind of going to the red. I think that looks a little cooler, or at least a little more striking anyways. But again, Hiya takes really funny pictures and we don't know what it's actually going to look like. So it's kind of hard to judge paint. One thing that I will say that I don't necessarily care too much about, but I do think Hiya's looks better, is the nails. I've heard some people say that her nails are not black. They actually are this purple in the film. I honestly can't remember. However, the color isn't really what matters to me. It's the fact that the nails just kind of end like they're just like, it's just like, oh, it stops. And this is just personal preference. It kind of looks like this little airbrush of that purple color into her fingies. Okay, so that's paint. I think they both have trade-offs. It's kind of just going to come down to your personal preference at the end of the day and what you think looks better on your shelf. Now, oh, Kong. Oh yeah, by the way, kind of going back to the price, and we will talk about this in my wonderful, really, really nice, not really confused and befuddled and flabbergasted feelings at all about adding accessories to Kong accessories to Shimo and Scar King. You know, that's we'll talk about it. We're going to talk about it. But yes, I skipped over this in my reaction video. Yes, they have a Kong with his silver tooth in there. Now let's talk about articulation. This one is going to be about as complicated, if not more, as the rest of them. Because here's the thing. When you look at the SH Monsterarts figure, there's a lot of cuts going on. There's a specific figure. Okay, right here. A lot of cuts in the shoulder, butterfly cuts, kind of like a little back plate that can probably adjust as you arch her back forward or back. Some neck cuts here that don't appear to be present on the Hiya one. And you got those double jointed knees and everything. I think the Hiya has that as well. And it looks like maybe possibly 3 cuts down her midsection for articulation. Here's the thing. SH Monsterarts typically ends up being better for articulation. I know Hiya has some figures that have some pretty dang good articulation. Honestly, the Skullcrawler, I think has some of the best articulation that Hiya has put out. I think their newer release of Kong has some pretty good articulation as well. But the thing is when it kind of comes down to it, if you're being completely objective, SH Monsterarts typically has better ball joints, better joint tolerances and smoothness of the action. We don't know what we're going to get here yet. So it's kind of hard to say just looking at pictures, but I will say Hiya looks like they really stepped up their game as far as the different types of cuts. We even get fingy articulation, just some good cuts. There's 2 cuts in the neck. I don't know what they're going to do, a similar thing to Godzilla's neck where it's like rubber, but it doesn't look like it. It looks like that's just going to be a normal solid piece. Some shoulder cuts. We got that bicep cut, double jointed elbow, forearm, hand, fingies. There's a lot. There's a lot of articulation on the Hiya Shimo as well. We don't know to the level of the quality if it's going to match SHMA's level of articulation, but there's hope, and I have hope for it. I just can't say for right now because I don't have them here and I'm not playing with these figures yet. Okay, also, SHMA doesn't have articulated fingies. That's kind of upsetting, but it does look like it has better neck articulation. And this little kind of gap here to probably kind of fold in the chest a little bit more. It says, so you can recreate poses from the movie. I honestly can't remember a single pose Shimo does in the movie besides just being on all fours or getting tackled through a building by Godzilla. But I mean, that looks good. That looks like you can do some decent things with it. The ankle's a little weird. It probably should be rotated out this way a little bit. But I'm just rambling at this point. Articulation is just kind of hard to say. I am gonna say that everything considered, even price considered and accessories considered, because yes, SH Monsterarts has an accessory for Kong, which I honestly think is a drawback. I think that reduces points for this figure, to be completely honest with you. That's just my opinion, but everything considered, I think Hiya has the edge. I know a lot of you also probably think Hiya has the edge, and just the sheer price difference between this figure being roughly $60 to $85 and the SHMA figure being probably close to $250 in the US release. That alone is probably enough for you to be thinking that as well, and that is totally fair. Not a lot of people can just drop hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a figure that honestly isn't even quite up to par of what we're expecting from SH Monsterarts. While I don't think Hiya wins because we don't know yet, I do think the scales are tipping in Hiya's favor. There's a lot more potential for this figure, and just looking at it, a lot more accuracy. So with all that being said, I just want to mention something about SH Monsterarts here. I get some comments saying that Monsterarts is dead, they're garbage. I don't think that's true. I think sometimes they put out less than quality products, but for the most part, Space Godzilla, I'm doing a review on that soon. I love that figure. Godzilla 72, Gigan, these are all wonderful, but they're more the Toho side of things. It just seems like the Monsterverse side of things, sometimes the quality, it's apparent that it's lessened in some cases, and I don't know if that has to do with timeline, licensing, general care for the Monsterverse, or otherwise, but sometimes we'll get figures like this, or Scar King, or others, King Ghidorah, and it just seems like, wow, that's a shame. And I say sometimes because remember, we are getting Godzilla Evolved, and that looks pretty sweet. Godzilla Evolved looks pretty sweet from Monsterarts. But still, I totally feel for you guys that are just Monsterverse collectors, where you are not getting the love you deserve. You deserve to have better figures when you want something like a Shimo, where it's like, okay, that was a cool character in this new movie that maybe you love, and maybe you love this character, and they're like, yeah, here's Shimo, I guess, give me $250. Like, I understand how that stings. Totally valid if you guys are upset about that, and maybe someday they'll put the same care into the Monsterverse as they do with their Toho stuff, because you guys deserve better. I really hope that Monsterarts can do better regarding this. But that's pretty much all I have to say. Like, comment, subscribe. Memberships are open if you care to do that, but just know that your viewership is more than enough for me, and I want to toss this off to you. Keep it civil in the comments, but I want to know which one you like better. And I'm sure there are going to be some people that like the Monsterarts version better. I want to hear your thoughts. You guys have been awesome in the comments. I don't really ever see any fights down there, so very excited to jump into these conversations and see what we all have to say. And if you even want to give a detailed list of why you think which one is better, go for it. I'd love to read it. But with all that being said, guys, thank you for watching. Really appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.